Welcome to the Transformational Storyteller Podcast. The stories we tell ourselves and others shape the lives we lead. I'm your host, Daralise Lyons. I first met today's guest, Lisa Cohn, at an authors conference in New York City. And she had a tremendous presence. She has a tremendous presence. And she came up to me and introduced herself, and we immediately became lifelong friends. I did not know her story until getting to know a little bit more about her. And it is one of the most incredible stories of transformation and healing that I've ever heard. Lisa had a very unusual childhood that I will let her tell you about, and the fact that she has emerged a pillar of strength and leadership and hope for so many, and just a voice of empathy and kindness. It baffles me. And reading her book, I think it's a life-changing book, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more as we get deeper into the podcast. But I wanted to give Lisa an opportunity to tell you just a snippet of her story, and I hope that it inspires you the same way that it inspires me. I am lucky to know this woman.
Hi, Daralise. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I'm thrilled to talk with you and to talk about To the Moon and Back, A Childhood Under the Influence, my newly released last September memoir. So I like to say, when people meet me now and they hear my story, they always say, I never would have known. And I always say, how would you? The way I describe my childhood, the best seats I ever had at Madison Square Garden were at my mother's wedding. So if you're old enough to know what that means, I was a Moonie, Reverend Sung Myung Moon, Unification Church, best friends with his kids. And my mom did get married in Madison Square Garden in 1982 with about 275 other couples. And on the other hand, the best cocaine I ever had was from my father's friend, the judge, because my dad is sex, drugs, and squalor, East Village of New York City in the 1970s. So I grew up between these two contrasting, juxtapositioning, crazy worlds. And now I am a leadership consultant and executive coach. I've had my business for over 20 years. And the stories that I tell in the memoir about what happened, I've taken everything I learned to heal and grow, and I bring it to my business. And I'm just trying to spread a message of hope and love with the book and with what I'm doing.
Lisa's story is incredibly inspirational. The courage and the strength that she shows is just mind-boggling to me. And one of our show sponsors, Just Strong, is all about women harnessing their strength and their power. If you would like to take advantage of the generous 10% discount that Just Strong lifestyle brand is offering for any of their items or clothing or whatnot, go to their website, juststrong.com, and enter the coupon code DARALISE10 for 10% off at checkout. Thank you, Lisa, so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh my God, I really, I just have to tell you, because I just finished reading the book, and I hadn't. I mean, we'd been friends. I've heard stories about, your childhood and your experiences, but I just, my heart bleeds for the child you, and also my heart is just so warmed and soars for the adult you and the woman that you've become.
Thank you. And we'll probably talk about this further. One of the weird things about trauma, right, I experienced some, is that you never really think it really is. And I would always say to people, was it really that bad?
Yeah.
And then when people read my book and go, oh my gosh, I'm like, really?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know that. So thank you for the validation of, it was hard.
It was hard, and I want to give listeners, viewers, a little bit of insight into the book. It's To the Moon and Back, A Childhood Under the Influence, and it is your experience, as you touched on in your story, but it's your experience growing up, the child, and I want to say, I'm going to use a word that might feel kind of intense, but for all intents and purposes, you were abandoned as a child. Lisa's mother, your mother, kind of, she went into the Unification Church and began taking care of other children, and you and your brother Robbie were left primarily to raise each other and yourselves, and then you went to live with your dad, who was drug addicted and kind of like unattentive, and so essentially you were left alone as a child to raise yourself.
It was us alone, me alone, my brother and I alone, Robbie and I alone. Yeah, it was a very. So the story of my mom leaving. So my mom, the things I say. So first of all, by the time my mom found the church in 1974, I was 10 years old, and by that time, life before then was so crazy, and we can go into that honestly the church was a haven in many ways, which is one of the crazy things about it. So she finds Reverend Moon, and she joins the church, and we're living at that point, my mother, my brother, and I are living with my grandfather in New Jersey, and my mom starts spending a little bit more time at the church and a little bit more time and going every day, and then going on the first train and coming on the last train back, and just not around. And then she sits us down in a chair at one point and says, I think I need to go. What should I do? Yeah. And we say, go, Mom, go. Mother, we called her Mother at that point. Go, Mother, go. And so then she left, and she moved into the church, into New York City, to work for the group that helped the parents who were members but couldn't leave their families because they had kids. So she went in to help them because they couldn't leave, but she left us. So then we were alone with my grandfather for a while before.
And you touched on this, but one of the most disturbing things for me about that was that you were sort of tasked with making the decision to tell her to abandon you. And, I felt like, essentially, as I was reading about your parents, I felt like they were the children and you and your brother were the adult. Is that fair to say?
I mean, my parents, in their defense, were very young.
Yes.
They were 18 when they got pregnant with my brother, 19 when they had him, 20 when they had me. So they really were not ready to be parents. And sometimes they both can be quite self-involved still, as you know, as you've heard. So it was our choice. It was our decision for her to go. And, you're serving God and you're serving the Messiah. You should go. And then she moved out. And then for years, everyone would tell us how lucky we were that our mother had left. Pay indemnity to suffer for God. And so you can't miss her. You're evil when you miss her. You can't be sad. So it was like we told her to leave, and then we couldn't be sad that she had gone. So it was it's a mind warp.
It's
it really
very
is.
confusing. And the other thing that struck me about you as a child, I mean, like, you were such a good little girl. I mean, and I know this about you because I know, as your friend and, and your confidant, like, there still is that in you, this desire to, like, do the right thing and be a good little girl. I don't have that. So you're going to have to explain that to me a little, because I was not ever trying to be well-behaved. I was the opposite.
I think all the different craziness and stuff that happened, before the church, my parents were both hippies, and it was just unstable, and they split up when I was very young, and a lot of crazy people, and my mom had boyfriends who beat her, and, my dad was the insanity of the hippie lifestyle, and the more straight-laced I was, if I walked, between the lines, if I didn't step on the cracks in the sidewalk, the more in control I was, and the more perfect I was, the more I would keep it safe, right? It's one of those psychological things. The more I would be fine, right? And the stuff that happened to me probably, made me feel not okay, and like I wasn't good. And so I tried to be good, and then I moved into a church where it was puritanical, and really you had to be good, and I had friends who were more good than I was by the hierarchy in a church, more blessed, more special. And so all of that, I am quite the recovering perfectionist. My ability to have to do it right and have to follow the rules, how it trips me up. Still, it trips me up to this day, right? I'm always my brother once said to me, Robbie once said to me, you even try and do not perfectly.
Yes.
Like I do. Like I try and, okay, I'm going to not be perfect. I'm going to do that. And I don't even think I'm doing it. Like I think I'm being involved and healthy when I try one more time to fix a relationship. And everybody's like, you're being a little perfectionistic there. You're being a little controlling. And I think I'm just being an involved person. Like it's so slippery in my brain, the need to be perfect and keep everything safe. There's a lot of old fear that I've let go, and I am letting go, but there's a lot, and that's the reaction to it. Just keep it safe.
Right. Well, and I appreciate that, in the memoir, even though you're talking about these experiences as a child, I feel like you gave us this lens, you gave your readers this insight into what goes on in the mind of someone who has a boundless capacity to love, who wants desperately to be loved in return, and feels that she needs to earn that love, right?
That would pretty much be me, yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I think in many ways that's my experience too, but I think I also had a case of the fuck it's. I related a lot to your brother in the story where, Robbie was, Lisa's brother was kind of, had all the same experiences of abandonment, but he had a lot more anger about it.
I was the people pleaser and the sweet one, and he was the angry one. And they both are helpful, and they both get in the way, right? So
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I was the one. I would get all straight A's, and he would not do as well. And when my mom left and we were living with my grandfather, who was very depressed and on the verge of a breakdown, and so I was responsible for the cooking and the cleaning and the shopping. I'm in 6th grade, and all of that, and I would beg Robbie to carpet sweep the floor, right? Because he just wouldn't do it, and I would, right?
Yes.
He's one of my best friends. No offense to him, right? We both reacted in these very different ways, and his anger helped him, and my people pleasing helped me, and they also really, really, really get in the way.
Yeah, well, and his sort of extremity, I think in many ways was helpful and protective. And also you were left to deal with it. I mean, there's a excerpt in the book where you're talking about how he wouldn't clean the room. Like you shared a room at one point for years, I guess you shared a room with him. And it was just a disaster area, and it was all his disaster.
And tore everything up and broke every toy and threw. I mean, literally, you could not see the floor. And in order for my mother, who we called Mimi at the time, her name, in order for her to come in, we would have to clear a path so she could walk in. And then sometimes that would even be too much, and she wouldn't come in and give us a kiss goodnight because even the path was too upsetting.
Right, but the insanity to me that she wouldn't say, "Hey, your kids clean your room." She would just, you know what I mean? It's just such an interesting.
Yeah, we had to clean it twice a year to get presents from our grandparents. And then there's a story in the book where literally we lived in the basement, and the windows were high up, and I come into the room one day and people are fishing in our room from outside trying to get toys off the floor. It was kind of kooky.
It's a really kooky childhood, and I'm gonna sort of, if you're watching this episode, you can probably see. So tell about your necklace. Necklace. If you're listening, you're gonna have to listen to the description.
So this is a subway token, New York City subway token from the 70s when I was a kid, because I live in Wayne, Pennsylvania. I'm out here in the burbs of Philly. But I am such a diehard New Yorker. We will travel, and people will say, "Where are you from?" And my husband will say, "We live outside of Philly." And every single time I go, "But I'm from New York."
Yes.
So this is like my claim of I'm a New Yorker. My children like to say, first mom's a New Yorker, and then mom's a mom, and I'm from there. So that's why I wear it. I wear it almost all the time because it's just part of. We moved into, so I literally moved in at 13 when my mom left, and then my grandfather got put into the hospital, and my dad finally found out, and he came and got us. Got shuffled around for a while, and he came and got us, and that's when I moved in, and I was terrified of New York City. But now it's such a primal part of who I am and how I identify, and so I wear it. That's my subway token.
Well, and you tell a story, and I want you to tell the story on the podcast, but in the book you tell a story of not jaywalking in New York City, afraid to jaywalk, and that to me is like you are not truly a New Yorker until you can jaywalk in New York City.
So my business partner now comes down to visit. She's like, "You're not crossing on the red." So I went back to that. So I was such a goody two-shoes that I would not cross at a red light. I would never. And it drove my mom crazy. It drove my brother crazy. It drove my dad crazy. They all hated it. And so one of the stories, as you know, is Robbie and I, we were coming in to see Danny. Danny worked at a bar in Soho.
And Danny is your dad.
Danny's my dad, right? Yep. Oh, yeah, right. So let's go. Danny's my dad. Mimi is my mom because, as my father will still say, I am a person. I'm not a label. Call me by my name. My name is Danny. If you call me Dad, I'll call you Dot. If you call me Daddy, I'll call you Dottie. Call me by my name. And that, so to this day, I will talk about it, and people go, does your father know you call him Danny? I'm like, that's a really long story. So Danny's working at the Broome Street Bar in Soho. He's a bartender. And Robbie, my mom, and Mimi would put us on the train in New Jersey, and we are 7 and 6, 8 and 7, something like that. Put us on the train, and we take the train to Hoboken, and then we take the PATH train to 9th Street, and we get out and we walk to the bar. Yeah. And so we come to the corner of 8th Street and 6th Avenue, which, if you know New York, is kind of a big corner.
Yeah.
And it's during the Greenwich Village Art Festival, so it's even more crowded. And the light is red, and Robbie wants to cross 6th Avenue, and there's no cars coming. And he says, let's cross. And I say no, and he says yes. Yeah. And I say no. So he crosses, and by the time the light changes, I can't find him.
Right. Yeah.
So there I am. I'm in Greenwich Village. I'm 7 years old or something like that. And I've always followed Robbie. I have no idea where the bar is.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going. Like, you know.
Yeah. And you're 7 years old in New York City.
In New York City, wandering around with no idea where I'm going. And so I wander the village for a while. I find a playground that I recognize, which is now where an NYU gym is. But the playground that I recognize, I see it. And from there, I kind of figure out how to get to the bar. Yeah. I'm so thrilled. And I make my way to the bar. And I walk in, and Danny's supposed to be behind the bar, but I look, and there's this man with a bald head behind the bar.
Yes.
Not my dad. So I am. Now I'm crying, right? Now I'm like, I'm lost, I'm found, I'm lost. And it turns out that it is Danny, because he got drunk the night before, a couple nights, and he shaved his head. So he comes up, and he's like, Twink, it's me. And what he's called me. He calls me Twink, Twinkle Star. And he's like, where's Robbie? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. And Robbie at that point was at the other end of the bar crying because he had lost his little sister in New York City, and there was a strange man with a bald head.
Yes.
Behind the bar.
And a tooth earring, apparently, right? Is that?
Yeah. So Danny was once at the bar, and there was a bar fight, and he went out to help, and someone knocked out his tooth, and so he took it, and he had it made into an earring, and he hung it. So he would, when my 5th grade play, he came and he showed up with the bald head and a top hat and a tooth hanging from his ear.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I thought, just going, I just have normal parents. And that was before the church, right? So that's why by the time we got to the church, it was my mom wore a bra and skirts and not homemade clothes and stopped cursing and became more normal, even in the cult of normality. So it's interesting.
And there was a lot of that, right? Like a lot of kind of like taking sanctuary even in the absurd, and a lot of feeling like, okay, well, this is better than what was, so I'm going to need to settle for that. Yeah. And what do you think, because there were parts in the book, because I wanted to I'm so on your side, as your friend, as a reader, et cetera, I'm so on your side. And so I wanted to, as I was reading the book, I kind of wanted to be mad at everybody on your behalf. I wanted to, but I found that there were some beautiful things that came from your childhood and some beautiful things that came from your experience in the church. And one of the things that I know about you is you are a person who makes everybody feel welcome, and you're a person who includes, and a person who, I don't think it's possible to be an outsider in your home or a stranger, in your experience. And I felt like a lot of that came from your experience in childhood. And so I don't know, I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit.
So yes, and maybe. So it's interesting because when I wrote the memoir, I am a person who has a huge heart, and I am a person who sees the positive, and I've learned to look for the positive. Yes. It's one of the ways I've healed, is one of the practices I believe in. And so I look back at the past, and I thought, okay, so what I got from the church was my loving heart. Because what happened was, we joined, I'm very young, and I realized I can do actually nothing for God. I can't be helpful, so what I'll do is I will love my brothers and sisters, all the church members, more than anybody else. I'll be the most loving, I'll take care of them, and I make an active decision to be very loving. And so I thought, well, I probably got my loving heart from the church. But I will tell you, I have 3 friends in the church, Reverend Moon's daughter, and then 2 other children, Korean girls, who were born and raised in the church. And I have reconnected with them. And when I would say that to them, they all go, you were like that when we met you?
Yeah, that's,
So I think that's me. But I think what I got from both, there's many things I could say that were not great about the Unification Church, but it did talk about one humanity and all races and everybody together and one family of man, right? And then So I had that inclusiveness, I think, from that. And then my dad, you can say a lot of crazy things there, but my dad welcomes everybody and is very engaging. He's really wonderful if he's not your father.
Yes.
Right? And is very open-minded. So I have a very open mind to a lot of things, and so I think my experiences gave me that in some ways.
Right.
That's kind of, so like I think I was always loving, but it ratcheted it up in different ways, I think.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And your loving heart, I mean, that was something that I, even before your mom joined the church, as I was reading the book, like there was a lot of love, but also a lot of anxiety wrapped around love. So I'm thinking about you kind of in the early part of the book, some of the first chapters, you would be sitting in the hallway, like waiting for your mom to come out of the bathroom, and you'd be like crying, because you just wanted to be with her and you just wanted to love her.
I was terrified she would leave. My dad had left. They had split up. My dad had left, and I was terrified my mom would leave.
Well, I wonder, do you think on some level you had some sort of like premonition or psychic, because I feel like what you were afraid of ended up happening.
Well, possibly, and Robbie used to say, she's going to leave too. I mean, he was an older brother, and he used to say that. Maybe it was my greatest fear, and then it happened. Yeah.
Right. And I think, one of the things, when our greatest fears happen and we survive them, like that for me is when we really become aware of our own resilience as human beings.
Well, what's funny, and you said anxiety, and I just said to you right before we started, so clearly I have some anxiety, right? And it makes total sense that I have anxiety.
Right, yes.
But I was so not aware of it. And so the other day, a good friend was reading the book, and she's like, it's dripping with anxiety. And I'm like, I had no idea that was the tone I was vibrating at, right? Because when it's all you know, it's all you know. And even though I knew my childhood was weird, I didn't know it was bad, and I didn't think it really had hurt me, right? And even though, like, as you go through the book, I go through a lot of experiences, and I end up crawling into Al-Anon on my hands and knees, at the age of 24, basically saying, tell me if he's an alcoholic. There's no way I would ever be with an alcoholic. And all these people with their poor, low self-esteem, totally unaware of how damaged I was and how self-loathing I was and how, like, all of that inside me, I am so functional.
Yes.
I'm so good at functioning and thriving and surviving, right? And just doing it, gritting my teeth and doing it as, part of that perfectionist thing, that I didn't even realize. It's when I talk about the book, like, so my story is quite unique. The only person I know with a very somewhat similar story is my brother. But the themes are universal, right? And so that those themes of the self-loathing and the self-disgust and the fear and all of that, how you, as a kid, things happen and you think it's you. You think it's you, right?
And for me, and correct me if I'm wrong because it's your story, but I'm just the observer. But what I was struck by was the anxiety seemed to have been there all along. I felt like the self-loathing was something that it was either taught to you by your experiences in the church, or it was intensified by your experiences of the church. Because what I felt like, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Unification Church, I was not familiar with it. But essentially, like, if you are the Reverend Moon was like he was seen as the Messiah, and then his children were seen as sort of like these blessed children, true children, like
sinless and revered and
and then there were other children who were like born into the church,
and they're blessed children, and they're born without original sin, and they are also very, very special,
right? And then the rest of you. And so I felt like that hierarchy of like, okay, I am a mistake, that feeling of no matter what you did, you were never going to be good enough. Like, I'm maybe that was there before, but I feel like it got very solidified in the church.
So I think it was there before, as you know. There's a strong possibility that I was molested when I was a kid, right? Which gives you a real sense of being tainted, right?
Yes.
So start with that or not, right? And then a lot of things happen, and my parents and stuff, you take it on as a kid, right?
Yeah.
It must have been, my dad left because of me, right?
Yeah.
That's what kids do, right?
Yeah.
And so you take that on. And then we got to the church where it was about, good and evil and the hierarchy, and I was definitely at the low end of the hierarchy, and the need to suffer and pay indemnity and be perfect for God, and I clearly was not perfect, and so that intensified it further. And then, as you also know when you read in the book, I was best friends with his kids, and got involved in, the only way I can say is a soap opera. Like, I got involved in a incredibly traumatic situation where a dear friend of mine spread rumors about me.
Yeah.
They got to Reverend Moon. He banished me from his children. So I like to say the Messiah said I was bad, right?
Yeah,
and so you do all that, and it just got it even bigger. And then when I finally left, I still knew it was true. I just couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was failing, right? So it all just kind of ba-boom, 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 that came up with the, badness.
Yeah, and there was such a hunger. There is such a hunger, I think, in your story to redeem yourself, right? Like a desire to just figure out how to pay, to atone,
I think I still
or
have
whatever.
that driving me. Now that you say
Oh my
that,
God, yeah.
every time we get together, you're like, you're doing it again.
Yeah.
I am. You're right. That's right. You're like, this is working for you. Why did you stop it? Because you need to be strong. Yeah, I did it again, and I did it again. And there is that redemption thing that.
And I mean, I
careful.
think that might be part of the human experience,
so.
right? That we all just want to be loved and figure out how to do that. And I too have that, like, I need to earn love and affection thing. And, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the work that you do now, because I feel like that is in some ways your redemption. Like, you took your story and you've been helping people. And even before your book was out there, even before you had written a book, you were doing this work to help other people. So what has that been like?
So I own a leadership consulting and executive coaching firm. So I work with organizations and with individuals, helping them be better leaders and better managers and better in the corporate world. And I do it from a much more internal place as well, right?
Yes.
And so I mean, the cool thing is now my memoir is out, so I get to say, well, you know my story, so you know this is from Al-Anon, right? But I share the things I learned in 12-step meetings, the things I learned in therapy, I share the things I learned in every self-help and meditation and mindfulness and positive psychology and all of the things I learned to heal.
Yeah.
I think as people, as human animals, we all need this.
Yes.
Or want it, or it's nice to have it, all these things. And so I share it in a corporate sense, right? So I am bringing what I found in order to be okay and giving it to people, which is really cool, and I love it. And I some people we just stay on the surface, and some people we go and really dig deep and say, hey, why are you carrying that with you anymore? That's not your fault. Let it go.
Right.
Let it go. Go take a bath, get a massage, walk around the block, clear your head, meditate.
Yeah. And like really having these tools, and then you've had to put them into practice for yourself. You talked about being okay, and the sense I get is that, you figured out how to be okay, but then that was just a springboard for a pretty great life.
I have a very wonderful life. I really do.
Yeah.
I really do. Most days it's amazing. Even when the days it's not amazing, if I stop and think about it, it's still pretty.
It's still a hell of a whole lot better. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and to say you're blessed, that's such a humble way to put it, because you
worked
worked really
There you go.
Yeah.
I get called out on that one a lot. I've worked really hard to build a beautiful life.
Well, and I just look at that choice of even language, like the feeling of being blessed, and I wonder, because you came from this this all-consuming religiosity in the church, and so how does spirituality factor into your life now? How have you reconciled that?
Yeah. So when I left the church, I could have nothing to do with it, because as soon as I thought about God, it was the God I grew up with, and then I deserved to die.
Okay.
I just deserved to die.
Yeah.
I tried a different couple ways, right, to hurt myself that way.
Yeah.
And is when I crawled into Al-Anon, and they give you the concept of a higher power.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I can do that. And I started to call it God because it's just easier. But now, as you know, I like to say God with a little g, right? Because the other one has too many hang-ups. So I am very spiritual. I'm not very religious.
Yeah.
Religion, I can sit in any house of worship and connect with my God, but my God, goddess is love, is spirit.
Yeah.
So that is my guiding
Yes.
source and light. That is my spirituality, is absolutely like coming back to my own and what heals me and holds me. But it's not tied to any religion, and it's certainly not tied to a God that needs me to be a certain way or do a certain thing or prove a certain thing or pay for the sins, or I don't do that anymore.
No. I mean, there's like a pledge in your book, the Unification Church pledge that they have you say every day and all this. And I got to like 3 sentences into that, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's no way I could measure up to this.
Oh, and I did some research when I was writing the book. Like I would research the teachings, and when I hear the teachings, there are parts of it, and I think I've said this to you, that still, I know they're not true, but they still are completely true in my brain. My brain still cannot see them as not true.
Yes.
Right? And when I did the pledge, or the holy songs, the songs we used to sing, like I know it. Like I could, if you started me, I could recite the whole thing to you. I haven't done it since I was 16, right? 17, maybe? And that's many decades ago, but it's still, but it's this I pledge and swear, this I pledge and swear, this I pledge and swear. I will fight for God, I will give my life, I will, restore God's love, I will restore the world, I will give anything, it's all. It's
right. Oh my goodness. And it just really goes to show how that early indoctrination in anything, I mean, there are still things that beliefs I had an aunt who died of cancer when I was 8 years old, and I thought it was my fault that she died, and I don't know how my brain made that connection, but it made those connection that it's my fault that she died. And I carried that for years, and then I thought I was going to die at 29, just as she died at 29. And I got to 29, and I made it through. I'm 35 now, and I was like, what do I do now? Like, I'm 30 now. Like, what do I do? I was supposed to die. Yeah. So, just that internalization, we really do. We do.
I mean, and that's what some of the work I do in work, right? So as humans, right, we make up stories. We try and interpret the world. Right? As kids, we completely misinterpret, right?
Yeah.
And to think you made her die, right, is a sense of power that I think we need as kids. Like, it'll make more sense even if it's bad.
Yeah.
But even as adults, like, all we do all day long is make up stories, right? That's how our brains work, which is wonderful, and it also gets in our way. So, like, what is the story I'm making up about me? What is the story I'm making up about you? What is the story I'm making about this situation? What's that old, like my old fears or old beliefs or my kick-in stuff that happens without me thinking about it? And is it really helping me now? And maybe it saved my life then, right? That's what I say to clients all the time, right? When I do the deep work, like these things, some of my clients, it did save their lives, right?
Oh yeah.
And some of the fear and the control and the perfectionism, and some of them they just think it did. But now we don't always need it. So how do we not? How do I not go there?
Yeah, and it's hindering now. That thing that is like it's.
I don't need this. I can be strong.
Right. I mean, I think it's like a life preserver, right, in a way. But then it becomes a weight. Yeah, and it'll just drag you down. And I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about. So I want to save your mother till after. I want to ask about your dad because I feel like we talk about a life preserver and a weight, and that is a really good metaphor for your dad. Yeah, because there were times in the book where I felt like, oh wow, he really is there. He showed up for you. He took you in. I feel like he really wanted to be good, but at the same time, he taught your brother how to smoke pot, at the same time. At the age of 10, right?
He's 10, a little young.
Encouraging you to like have sex, and trying to just like jokingly with his friends, like talk about kind of like jokingly sell you to his friends,
to his friend, yes.
Right,
so I just found out he's still alive and now visiting my father.
Oh my God, yeah. So there's like all this weirdness in your dynamic with your dad, and so I kind of wanted to ask, like, what was the story that you told yourself about your dad as a child? And I do know a little bit about reading your book, but I want like you to be able to kind of articulate that. And then what story do you tell yourself about him now, looking back?
Yeah, so I was always a mommy's girl.
Yeah.
When he left, I never wanted to see him. I didn't go to visit him very often. My dad was loving when we were young in a lot of ways, but I was terrified of him. I was terrified of his life.
Yeah. As well you should have
As
been.
well I should
Yeah,
have been.
yes.
It was not a safe place for young
Yes.
children. And it's funny because when my mom left and my grandfather went into the hospital and my dad came and got us, his friends will be like, well, he came and got you. And eventually someone will say, but he was my dad. Like, he really should have come and got us.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
so
yeah.
he did take us in, and his friends also say he was like the most together one of all of us, because it was the 70s,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
But this, I mean, and then we joined the church and we lived with my dad. So by the church, he's Satan. Like, his life is Satan.
Right.
He's satanic, right? And so
Right.
he's taking us in and loving us. She's not,
Yeah.
but she's good and he's bad.
Right.
And right, and he never says anything nice, never says I love you, but takes care of us and actually shows up and does and will. Like, if I'm sick, and would always actually show up when
Yeah.
I had my second child and I could never put him down. He always needed to be held. My father, on his one day off he would come and visit me and hold my son so I could sleep when my father shows up. And my mom would always say the most wonderful, loving things, and then not show up or leave. So it, so I and then as I started to leave the church, I started to get closer to Danny. Hence the cocaine, right? That's when I started to hang out with him and do blow with him, and it's like probably the closest we ever were. He loved that. Although then he'd get me all high on coke and then get mad at me that I wasn't eating because I was also anorexic. So I was like, but you did this. And,
Yeah.
so I don't know what story I told then. It was confusing to figure out what his love was or wasn't. I do believe that he did, even the crazy things he did them with him thinking he had our self-interest in mind, right? So I'm going to raise my kids free. I'm going to expose them to things. I'm going to give them, a nice open lifestyle.
Yes.
Yeah. And now, so Danny had a stroke 11 years ago, something like
Okay,
that. 11,
yeah.
12 years ago. He became half disabled, lost his right eye and the use of the left side of his body, ended up in an assisted living facility in Princeton, outside of Princeton, New Jersey, halfway between New York and where I live in Pennsylvania. And then proceeded to smoke cigarettes in his room and light so many fires and burn the carpet so many times that they put him into a nursing home.
Oh,
and so now he's a very, very old 75-year-old and in a wheelchair, and it's just really sad. And so now, and I'm his primary caregiver, and so now it's very convoluted. I adore him.
Yes.
I have such compassion for him.
Yeah.
He's so difficult to be around and to be with.
Yeah.
He can be sweet. There was one time I saw him recently, and he said to me, "You're my lodestone," which is that magnetic thing in the compass that points north, like he does. And then there's sometimes when he makes completely inappropriate comments about sex, and because he's still Danny, right?
Yes,
and so it's
yes,
this
yes.
very like, the good news is I have compassion for him, and I mean, my heart breaks. My heart breaks when his life, which is just so sad. Like beyond belief. So
yes.
I don't have a good, easy, straight answer for that.
Well, I don't think there is a good, easy, straight answer for that. And I think, it's just dawning on me in this moment, but the subtitle of your book,
Under
To
the
the Moon
Influence.
and Back, A Childhood Under
Both.
the Influence, I feel like that title applies to you, that you were a child under the influence of both extremes of your parents, but I feel like your parents were children.
Absolutely.
They were children parenting other children, and they were under the influence. Your mom was under the influence of the church,
religious,
and your dad was under the influence of drugs and alcohol and, debauchery. Yeah.
Recently, I mean, I come to it sometimes, but I recently came to felt the terror I felt at living with him. It was scary.
Yes.
It was just, it was just not a stable place. Yeah.
Right, and no wonder you and Robbie drew so close, and that comes through so much in the book and in just knowing you and how you feel about your brother and the fact that he'll still, he still is at your house often. And
I like to say I am his country home.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then just to touch on your mom,
Yep.
I want to talk a little bit about her. Because there is so much love. You talk about being a mommy's girl, and I too am a mommy's girl who had to have a shattering of illusions about the mother that I believed my mom to be versus the person that she actually is. And that love hasn't changed, but perhaps my belief in her has needed to change. And so I guess I just wanted to ask you how reconciling that, is, how it is for you.
As you know, it's a journey.
Yeah.
I've been distant, incredibly close, distant, incredibly close.
Yeah.
Now I would say guarded.
Yep.
And trying to, again, my mom would always say the right thing and sometimes couldn't show up, and has this habit of just not coming through, or saying and doing things that I would never say or do to my kids. Like, she just doesn't think it through, and she'll say she realizes she just doesn't think it through, or she just blurt things out, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
And she used to say, I really hope you get over this sometime. I'll get over the fact that I left. And it's like, what do you do with that?
Well, there's a youngness, right? Like an immaturity there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's but I, again, I feel myself, she's around. She's in the other room, actually. And, and I am like, she came down to spend time with my son. And I'm like, can I let you in a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
And see, is there a way to have, because my brother can be like, I'm not going to talk to you ever again to people. And I don't do that. But I've learned not to be like, here, take me, hurt me, right? Because then you just put yourself out to be hurt, right? Yeah. So I've had to learn to be like, I will love, but I will be careful. And I will open, but I won't open all the way, because I can no longer put myself out enough.
Yeah.
Out so much that I can get really, really devastatingly hurt, right?
Yes.
I've done that, and it doesn't work. So it's definitely a learning, and I know that she loves me.
Yes.
And it's like we're trying to find a way to what that means and what can it mean, I guess.
And she's supportive of this book, right? I mean,
180%. It's crazy. She's been my biggest supporter. She's so supportive. She'll do anything. And at the same time, obviously terrified for how she looks and what people think. And so, of course, it flips her out, right? And so, that's why she's not in the room listening to this, because, like, I don't want her to hear something that she gets triggered by. Yeah. She doesn't, like, that's not going to help our relationship, right? If we need to talk about it, that's one thing, but, to put her in an experience where she needs to hear things that are going to trigger her, whether or not I think they're true, it's just, it's not going to help. But she'll do anything. And every interview I had, she had to say, yes, I support it, and yes, this is true, and yes, and this is not the way maybe I would tell it, but yes, right? Yeah. And find the photos that proved we were in the church so that Megyn Kelly would interview me and all of that. So she's been since day one supportive, but also,
there's so much love in your memoir for your mother. Your feelings towards your dad, to me, seemed to be a little less steady, maybe like a little more confused and problematized, but your feelings for your mom and your mom's feelings for you, the love shines through. The behaviors don't always quite match the emotions, but I felt like you sincerely wanted to love your mom, and still do. Yeah. And your mom sincerely wanted to love you and maybe didn't know how to bear that out. Yeah. I mean, does that feel kind of accurate?
Maybe makes sense. Yeah, and I have to remember that, so when I was interviewed for Megyn Kelly, in the backstory, they said, were you brainwashed? And I'm like, I wasn't brainwashed. I didn't have a brain to be washed. I was pickled in it.
Yeah.
When you grow up in a situation, they have done research that proves exactly what it does. Extremist situations and specific types of dangerous situations carve your brain in a specific way. So I was pickled, but my mom was brainwashed. My mom lost ability to actually think rationally, right? And anybody is susceptible to that. It can happen to anyone, and it happened to her. So when I look at that, it's like, well, then of course she did leave and a series of other things where she just let things happen to us in the church and with my dad and living with she just let it happen because she believed in the Messiah, and the Messiah said do this, and so her central figure, her leader in the church said do this, and don't cry in front of your kids, and move and go further away, and don't see your kids, and don't take them out. And there was one time where she was working in a nursery taking care of other people's kids, and we used to visit every weekend. And then, again, rumors got started, this time about my brother, and we were no longer, they made a declaration that only relatives of the kids in the nursery could come into the building. And so we would literally, it was in Tarrytown, New York, and we would take the bus up and hear Reverend Moon speak in the morning, and then we'd go over to Jacob House where my mom lived, and we'd knock on the door and say, can Mim come down and say hi? And if she could, she would come outside and give us a quick hug. And if she was busy, they would say, no, she's busy, but hopefully she'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Right? And the fact that, on one hand, that happened and she let that happen is you can't fathom it. On the other hand, she had no choice if you actually really understand an extremist situation, right? And so it's how do you, and at the time, I thought there was nothing wrong with it, and I was wrong to miss her and think I was sad, right? I couldn't be sad and I couldn't complain because God's people said this is right. So it's very convoluted.
It's so convoluted. It's so convoluted, and I wonder. I mean, to have this example of love and to have this example of mothering and fathering and all of that, but you are married. You have a husband. You have 2 children that you love dearly and are there for. And so how the hell do you parent, given your example of parenting?
Well,
how do you
I jokingly like to say, first of all, when the bar is low, it's very easy to go above it. Okay. And I also like to say there's only so far you can do. Just do the opposite. But I will probably cry. I do know that I healed through loving my children, right? And I'm not going to say I'm the perfect mom and I did everything right, and I probably over-enmeshed with both my children to make up for my under-enmeshed parents. But I am a good mom, and I walked into it. All I wanted was for my kids to know they were loved, because I did not ever know that. How my dad acted and all the things that happened with my mom, I walked away not feeling loved or lovable. Whatever, that's how you interpret it. And so I just needed my kids to know that no matter what. And so, I mean, I probably read a lot of books, right? A lot of books about how to be a parent. I probably read a lot of spiritual books. I read, I'm trying to think of John Kabat-Zinn book about parenting, which is really like, these are whole beings and let them be whole beings and just give them space.
Yes.
That's the way I can put it. And I spent so many years trying to heal me. And I brought all of that to my parenting. I mean, I probably, did too much and tried too hard and all of that as well. But my kids are, they're the biggest blessings in my life. And they do, beyond anything else, know that I, sometimes annoyingly, if you ask my younger child, love them. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like you took, because your mom said all the good things. And your dad was physically there. And I feel like you took both those things and combined them. So you have always been there for your children, and you've always let them know how important they are to you. Which is just
And again, I probably went over, but I'd rather go over than under.
Right.
They're okay. They're not too messed up from it. So.
Well, they're pretty great people. They're pretty great people. And also don't feel a need to conform to the status quo, right? Like, so they are okay to be themselves as individuals and to be loved.
There's that open-mindedness and absolute unconditional acceptance that I've learned to give. That they, let my kids kind of know that there's nothing they need to do to be loved. They can go be themselves, whatever the heck that is.
Oh my gosh. If only we could all have parents that give us that. Right? Like, if only.
I do. I get from one of my kids. I get like, you get the parent. All my friends want you. But,
Yeah. Well, and I know, for people who are watching, you can see that Lisa has green hair tint, and but people who are listening cannot see that. So I feel like you, as an adult, have been giving that more and more to yourself, that you don't have to quite.
I really conformed.
Yes.
And then there was a while where I really didn't conform.
Yep.
Right? And then I met my husband, who is much more of a conservative background, and I was like, and I really conformed.
Yeah.
And then over the years, and especially the recent years, I'm like, I'm me, right? First of all, I like self-expression. I like jewelry.
Yes.
My earrings usually don't match anymore, and I used to do that all the time in my 20s. And and I like to say I got inked, and I got the dyed hair before my oldest child. It was at contest. Because it was like, why not? Like, it's fun, and I'm not normative in a lot of ways, and that's
No, but
fine,
but
right?
you're still, you're still like super responsible and you want to get it right, but you can also have green hair. You know what I mean? And you can also do yoga and like be, a little bit like gritty and alternative. And I think that's, I mean, this podcast is called the Transformational Storyteller Podcast, and I think
right.
it is about like, what are the stories that have shaped us? What stories do we need to change? And then like, what parts of ourselves of our character feel whole and true and authentic? And to me, I feel like part of your journey was rediscovering the parts of yourself that were lost along the way.
So the tattoo, right?
Yeah.
I got that because I have in many ways integrated the church, right? A therapist years ago told me you need to integrate the church, and I'm like, no blanking way am I ever doing that.
Yeah.
But I have. I've gone back. I've gone to places. I've seen people. Just about everybody in the book I've connected with.
Yeah.
My friend who threw me under the bus, I'm going to see her for the first time in decades on Wednesday. She's picking me up at the airport in San Francisco. So I really integrated that, and this was about owning my life with my dad, right? Because the funny thing is, it's exactly what I remember his girlfriend having and doing to my father's friends, and it is similar to what she has and kind of similar to what they have, but not exactly, which is the funny thing about memoir. But it was owning it, and I have a dear friend who said I've holed, right? And I feel like with the book and with the conversations and reconnecting with people I never thought I'd have, and having conversations I never thought I'd have, and sharing so much with strangers, right? It has absolutely hold me and let me be even more of figure out what that authentic self really is, and be it and own it and be okay with it, which is the hard part. And so I say, like, I'm bearing my soul for three main reasons, right? One is that extremist situations are dangerous. They're intoxicating.
Yep.
There's nothing more intoxicating than knowing you have the truth, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's not really true. And they're all over the place now.
Yes.
There's the reason it's terrorist attacks, it's gangs, it's religion. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of
Oh,
extreme
absolutely.
situations. The second message is for anybody who feels hopeless or damaged beyond repair.
Yeah.
I want to give a message of hope because I have had and can have moments where I do know that I am damaged beyond repair and need to die, right? They still happen. But they're less and they're not true, right? So I want to give a message of hope. And the third is from my work and my life and my friends, right? I just think as humans, we are all way too hard on ourselves, self-lambasting, self-critical, self-judging, and we need a huge dose of self-compassion, right? And so I'm walking around with some people love this. I like strangers, and other people are like, is your hair blue? And in Philly, like, is that for the Eagles? I'm like, it is not for the Eagles.
Yes, yeah. You're a New Yorker, right? You're a New Yorker. Yeah.
Right, and so it's like owning and allowing all of me, right? How can we all just be like, I'm okay, even on my worst days. I'm okay, right? And even when I mess up, I'm okay. And even when I feel like I can't get out of bed, let me get myself a hug because I'm okay, right?
And especially at those times,
I know,
right? Especially at those times. Not even when I mess up, but especially when I mess up. Yeah. And, just for anyone who can't see, who's listening, the tattoo that you have, would you just describe it?
Yeah, it's on my right arm around the little
there's like a little bump. Yeah, there's a little bump. Yeah,
it's kind of an off-kilter circle, so it's thinner on one side and thicker on the other, and it goes around that. And again, that's exactly what I remembered her having. But she actually has an off-kilter circle with a very small hole in the middle, very thick, and mine is very open in the middle. And the other friend has two snakes circling each other, making a circle. So they all kind of have circles, but that's what it is. It's very small. It's very understated.
Yeah,
but I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is so, it's really
cool. And
I
did get ink before my child, which is like really cool.
Yes.
My nephew goes, it's not a contest. I'm like, hell yes, it is.
Life is a contest, right? Life
totally
is a contest.
I'm totally kidding. They went with me. They're like, no, bring my mom. It's like I also have this little the little piercing in my cartilage in my ear. And when we went, the two of us went, and a guy knew that we were getting two and said to my kid, where do you want them? And my kid goes, one here and one on my mom.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's great. Yes, I love that. Whereas I remember at one point I snuck out of a treatment center that I was in, and I got my eyebrow pierced, and my mother was horrified. But you would have gotten yours pierced with your daughter, perhaps, maybe.
Maybe not the eyebrow, but I was like, we'll do this.
Absolutely. So, I think I have a general sense, and you were just talking about the the three reasons you wrote the book, but I like to ask everybody who's on here, if your life is a story and you're looking back at the story of your life that has been written so far, if you could sort of dig out like maybe a theme or a lesson for people, what would you feel like would be the most important lesson that you would want to be imparted from your life story to date?
Yeah, it's the hope and love and self-compassion. It's the sense of, so many of us. I mean, awful things happen, right? And I'm not negating it, but so much are in so much suffering, right? And anything I can do for me and I can do for you to choose joy and choose love and choose hope, even in the worst circumstances, right? And all of that. That's why I am, talking about this. Yeah, because I just think that's it, right? That's what matters. It's we can make the day. We can find a way to love, right? And how can I let love into my life? And how can you let love into your life? And how can I connect, right? How can I connect?
And I love that you said, how can we choose love? How can we choose hope? How can we choose? Because I think that, that is one of the things that I really try to impress upon the people that I'm working with or talking to or whatnot, that, the stories that we tell ourselves, the events are not, we don't have the capacity to choose them always. The facts of our lives, we can't always choose, but the meaning that we give them can be chosen. The who we are, how we show up for life, we can make certain choices about.
And I can choose to feel and notice and ruminate on how everything's awful, or I can know that everything is awful right now, because I am facing some stuff in my life right now that's hard. And I can look outside and see the sunshine and be like, oh yeah, there's sunshine.
Right.
The sunshine makes me smile, so I can smile at the sunshine for a second, or make myself a cup of tea, or feel the fleece blanket on my little slippers, and they feel really good, and find things that just give me ease versus hunkering down and pushing through so good.
Well, and everything is never awful, and everything is never wonderful, right?
I have a friend who's going through a really tough time now in divorce and selling the house and all that, and another friend. Anyway, the Decemberists, I think, have a song, Everything is Awful. And it's hilarious, right? Because it's like everything is awful, everything good is crashing. And so now, I text my friend that, every day, everything is awful. And it makes her laugh, right? Because even when everything is awful, not everything. And if we can just find anybody, ourselves or someone else, to just pull us out for a second. And the people in the concentration camps, some of them found hope, right? And the people in the worst situations, some of them can find hope. Is there anything that can give me hope when I need it? Can I ask somebody for it? I've learned to really be like, help, I need a hug, as opposed to shouldering you. And if I see you suffering, is there any way I can text you everything is awful, or a heart, or whatever, to just let you know you're not alone. You're not alone. That's what I say. I get reached out to by, on Twitter, it's so cool, and Facebook and Insta, by all these people who don't know me, and some of them are in real pain, and I'm like, you're not alone. It does get better. I know you feel alone, and I know you feel like there's no hope, but it does get better, and you're not alone. There are other people who've gone through this too.
Yes. And if they haven't gone through that exact experience, they've gone through something, and they can relate to you.
And I said to this one young person reached out to me at one point, in a really tough situation, and I said, there's one thing I believe to be true, right? I would not wish trauma on anybody and suffering, but when you experience hard times, I have found that you have a better appreciation for the simple things in life than people who haven't ever suffered, right? And so, like you will go through this, and this is horrific what you're experiencing, I said to this person, but there'll be a point where maybe you're with a day without pain. You'll be like, oh my God, I feel fine today, right? Or the sun is shining, or I jokingly say years ago, we're driving home from New York, my husband and I, and pick up our kids. We spent the night with friends of mine from high school. And I said to him, don't you just stop and be like, oh my God, I'm so lucky. My life is so amazing. And he goes, yeah, not really. And so I did not take that personally. It's just, but that. So, but I spend my life going, I can't believe how blessed I am. Even if I work, I cannot believe that I, have a generally happy marriage, right? And I have 2 kids whom I adore. And I have so much joy and love in my life, and the sun is shining, and I have a friend like you who I picked up at a writer's conference, right? And I have so much, and someone who hasn't maybe hit the depths would be like, yeah, but I don't have this, this, and this, and this, right? And so it's just I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it gives a perspective. Like, it's
Yes.
a choice. Love is a verb. Hope is a choice. Joy is a choice, right?
Yeah.
Even in my darkest moments, maybe I can't, but in my semi-darkest moments, how can I
Yes.
remember that and do something that brings that back to my heart? So
Yeah.
that's why I'm naked with my book.
Yes, well, and I'm so grateful. And, and speaking of reaching out to you, you mentioned people reaching out to you on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. So tell people where they can contact you.
So a couple places to contact me. It's parts of it are really easy now. So it's my website is Lisa Kohn Writes. It's LisaKohn as in Nancy Writes WRITES.
Yep,
Like
yep,
writing, right?
yep.
.com. And all of my social media is Insta is Lisa Kohn Writes, Twitter is Lisa Kohn Writes, Facebook is Lisa Kohn Writes. They're all different ways. And so when people I don't know reach out to me, it's even more amazing than when people I do know reach out to me. So you can email me, you can tweet me, you can Facebook message me, you can Insta me.
Yeah, and we'll put links to all that in the show notes so that people can be in touch.
I love connecting with people, and I will speak anywhere about this to anybody because we could all be so much happier.
Yeah, well, thank you again so much. Thank you so much. I highly encourage you to buy a copy of Lisa Kohn's book, To the Moon and Back, A Childhood Under the Influence. I read it and I was riveted from the first word to the last word. We are going to put a link to purchase in the show notes, but if you go to Amazon.com/shop/Daralease Lyons, you can find this book and many others on my Amazon page, and buying through that page link helps support Lisa and it helps support this podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Transformational Storyteller Podcast. As always, thanks to our episode sponsors, our production team at Rebel Hill Consulting, and of course, many thanks to you, the listener. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you're creating stories that empower you and inspire others.